thank you very much for being here tonight. As Adzi said, we really appreciate it. It's great. Okay, so before we have a look at tonight's workshop, can we finish off? I'll sort of just be able to see you there, Jeanette. We might just finish off from last week. Okay, so obviously last week we did our rhythm workshop. Everything you need to know about rhythm and nothing you don't. Okay, just roughly, briefly, was there any feedback from that? Nope. Okay, no problem. Okay, it's...
We've got one.
I just really want to thank you for posting the video on YouTube. I'm working my way through it because I wasn't able to actually be there last week. So while I'm cooking dinner...
Good on you, Nikki. That's the spirit.
Yeah.
That's the spirit. Thank you. That warms my heart.
I haven't done my homework yet, but that's okay. I think that's okay.
It is. It's totally fine. That's fine. So there you go. You can follow. We'll all follow Nikki's example, and while we're cooking dinner, we can catch up on the rhythm workshop. So listen, it's here. Okay. So I've created a Vision Worship YouTube channel.
Cool.
Okay. Now the video is an hour and a half long, because obviously we went for even longer than an hour and a half. Okay. But I don't assume everyone's got an hour and a half just kind of to spend necessarily. So what I've gone through is, what I've done is I've gone through and I've chaptered up all the relevant sections of the 1.5 hour video. So if you want to jump to me cracking a joke about needing to find a pulse, don't you, Michael? The rest of this is nonsense, but I think 3 is where I personally think people miss out. I've just clicked on the wrong one. If the music is going whizzing past you... Okay, so basically just the point is that the chapter markers just jump you to all the various spots. So if you're looking through all of this here, you can just jump to straight where you need to get to. Okay? It's not going to work on mobile and it's not going to work on tablet, as in YouTube doesn't allow it on mobile and tablet, but on laptop or desktop you can just jump to where you want to get to. So if you're browsing through this and something catches your eye, you can just go straight there. Okay? So it makes a 1.5 hour video a bit more accessible.
Plus if you want to go back and see something again.
Absolutely. So if you wanted to talk about, if you wanted to revisit R6/8 and 3/4 interchangeable. Hey, who wants to tell me what is identical about 6/8? Here's the conversation we had about 6/8 and 3/4. Okay, so the chapter markers just make a 1.5 hour video just a bit more doable, I think.
That's great.
So that's there. Okay, cool. And I mean, I think that that's worth it. So for any of these longer videos, I think it's worth doing.
We can do it in the kitchen and chop on the downbeat.
Yeah, Nikki's chopping in quarter notes, and then she's chopping in 8th notes, and then she's chopping in 16th notes. Yeah, and then the stir fry's only got tiny bits of carrot.
Well, that's how it works.
Exactly. Okay, so that was last week. Okay, that's rhythm. Okay, so here we go. Workshop number 2. Workshop number 2 of 6, which tonight is ear training. Okay, so learning to hear and identify chord progressions. And obviously this is actually an area I personally think that Adam's quite strong in, and so he and I are obviously going to be presenting this one together tonight. Okay, this stuff runs for about an hour and 15 minutes and then it's going to give up, so we'll just try to get through all of it in an hour and 15. Okay, so let's start broad. Why would we want to be interested in ear training for what we do as a worship team? What are some things?
Spontaneous worship, following the worship leader.
Spontaneous worship, following the worship leader. Totally.
Improvisation.
Okay, yeah. Okay. And improvisation. Yep, anything else?
So you can do unplanned songs on the spot.
Okay, cool. Really good. Okay, so unplanned songs. Yep, anything else?
throw in a key change or something? Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so if you want to do like a modulation, or do you mean if you want to do a song that you're used to playing in G, and just for this week we're going to do it in A?
Or either that or during the song as well.
Okay. Transposition. Yep. Okay. Anything else?
It's just learning the songs in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I reckon that's a big one.
Confidence and
Mm.
I reckon if we have well-trained ears, you can learn a song literally in half the time.
Mhm.
Because you just go, you kind of zone in really rapidly on the song, on the chords that are being used in the song.
Mhm.
And there's a difference between knowing what's played and actually knowing why something is played as well.
Yep.
To be able to sing harmonies.
Yeah. Harmonisation. Yeah.
Mm.
Yep. Okay. Anything else?
To be able to hear 3 different vocal harmonies and decide which one you're going to go for.
Okay. So, for example, 3-part.
Mhm.
Yep. And then being able to hold a part, Emily.
Yeah,
Sounds like
exactly,
that's... Yep. Yep. Okay, let's just go right back to what Beth said. Beth was talking about spontaneous worship. And Jen mentioned about doing unplanned songs. So I think really spontaneous worship can either be, I guess, what we would call a new song. So a repeating phrase or something that the worship leader has on their heart, maybe. Like sometimes, on Thursday nights or whatever, a worship leader will say, I just want to sing something out at this point in the set or whatever. We would think of that, I think, as a
or
new...
sort of a prophetic song, I guess you could say, as well.
It's like a new composition,
Yeah.
composition of the song.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or it could be an existing song which we hadn't previously practiced. And I'm sure that as a worship team, all of us would like to do our bit to contribute on those Sundays when we feel God leading us,
Mm.
the Holy Spirit's leading, to either do a new song or an unplanned song, and to be able to make a contribution. Now, I've got to say, it's a bit easier for some than others. I'm looking at kind of drummers and vocalists at the easy end of this particular spectrum.
I find it pretty easy.
Okay, and sound.
Or hard, depending on how the team's going. Yeah.
Okay, so for my 2 cents, especially around the spontaneous worship, I have to say that probably, in my opinion, this would concern bass players in particular, because I would say that really feeling either an unplanned song or a new song really lift and build is pretty hard without the bass notes to really ground it.
Yeah.
And really let it lift. Drummers, we can kind of work it out if we're supposed to be getting louder or softer at this particular moment. But I would say bass players, having a root note of the chord and having that confidently in place spontaneously, if we're going to have those moments lift in our worship. And then obviously keyboard players as well are also on that list, I would say. Guitarists, for sure. But guitarists can probably just get away with kind of knowing they're in G and then playing kind of G kind of things. Like if you know the G major scale and you're an electric guitarist, you can kind of just play G stuff and it's going to be okay. But really bass players, keyboard, I reckon, I think this is of all the 6 workshops we're doing, this one might be the one for you guys. I just want to... Yes, for you guys. I'm just making sure I'm making eye contact with all the people that actually play that on our worship teams. Okay. We should also say sorry, just for anyone who wasn't here last week. We're recording for those same 3 reasons as last week. 1, you'll have a chance to review tonight if you want to. 2, there's plenty of people tonight. There's a clash with a Trinity Christian school thing, so a lot of our Trinity parents, so Patch, Tony, Andy, Ali, are there tonight or would otherwise be here. So they'll get to see it, and also this will be another one of our training videos for new worship team members. So if you're a new worship team member, again,
Welcome.
should we say hi to them again and do the embarrassing? Hi! Okay, yeah. They're still with us. They're still with us, baby. It's good. Okay. Adam and I wrote this. As a worship team, we value times of spirit-led, spontaneous worship. Okay, now, of course, spirit-led worship can mean just running the set top to tail like you practiced it on Thursday night. But we also want to leave room for the Holy Spirit to lead us every Sunday. Yeah. And I know all of us want that. Okay, musical spontaneity is underpinned by a range of skills, two of which we're going to look at tonight. Firstly, anticipating which chords are most likely to be used in a given key. Okay, and we're using the Nashville Number System for that. And secondly, familiarising yourself with the feeling and movement of common chord progressions so you're able to identify them by ear. Okay, and that's the ear training component of tonight. So practically speaking, we're trying to bring together knowledge of which chords you're likely to see in a given key with ear memory of how chord progressions feel to you so that you can pick up and play a chord progression without practicing it first. Okay? So to me, that's the scope of what we're taking a look at tonight. Okay. Any comments about that, or does anyone want to contribute anything? Any questions around that? Okay. Do you want to run us through the 3 goals?
Yeah, so 3 goals for this workshop. As you can see, learning how to use the Nashville Number System. We did do some training on this a few years back, so for some of you it will probably be somewhat familiar. If not, we'll do a quick overview tonight, and there are other resources that you can access if you wanted to kind of look into it more. So using that to learn to anticipate the most likely chords in a given key. And we'll kind of go into a bit more depth shortly. We're going to look at 4 different approaches and learn them to work out a chord progression by ear. And we're going to practice some ear memory using progressions of 2, 3 and 4 chords, just to kind of get ourselves in that space of listening out for how the chords sound in relation to one another, depending on which chord is played in the progression. So they're the goals for this workshop, and we could spend hours, I think, on this stuff and practicing and running through, but hopefully what we have tonight will just be succinct, to the point, and really helpful in terms of then you going away to, put it into practice and learn and try out a few things. Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, so has anyone not heard of the Nashville Number System? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Emily, you've not heard of that?
No.
Okay, yep, no problem.
I'm not
Okay.
very familiar with it.
Sorry, Jeanette?
I'm not overly.
Okay.
I've never heard of it since I've been here.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't really used it a lot.
Yeah, we haven't used it as on our music or things like that. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. All right, let's, because we did talk about that. We did a workshop in 2015. It feels like a long time ago. It seriously was that long. It seriously was that long. So this was the handout from 2015, and we started from scratch with practical music theory. I'm going to make that available once the video goes up. In the little description box, there's a PDF. I've uploaded it to the website, and you'll link through. So if you want to start with some background practical music theory, that was the handout from 2015. Okay, that's worth looking at. The other one is really good, and this is actually published by Vineyard UK, and this is a whole handout on the Nashville Number System for worship teams. It's really good. It's like very much to the point. There's more information in this than there is in what we're going to do tonight, because we're really just trying to look at the Nashville Number System in the context of ear training tonight. But if you want to know a bit more about Nashville Number System, that's a really good one, and I'll link to that from the video as well if you're interested in that one. Okay. All right, so Nashville Number System is chord shorthand, which assigns a number to each chord or each scale degree within the major scale. Okay, so as we know, there are 7 notes in the major scale, and by the time we get to the 8th note, we're up to the octave. Okay, with each of those scale degrees, there is an associated chord. Okay, and we did talk about this in our previous one. So the root chord or the 1 chord is always major. The 2 chord is always minor. 3 chord is always minor. 4 chord is major. 5 chord is major. 6 chord is minor. And the 7 chord is diminished. We couldn't, between the two of us, think of any worship song. We're happy to have suggestions. But we couldn't think of any worship song that used a diminished chord, the 7 chord.
Is Tom not one in there somewhere?
He uses some majors where there's minors.
Yeah.
We went through a couple today. Majorises the minor. But in terms of a pure diminished 7th, we couldn't.
We couldn't think one. I googled it.
Yeah.
I couldn't find one. If you guys turn one up, okay. And why not? Just out of interest, why don't we see the 7 chord, the diminished chord, in worship music?
Because it's usually to go to the major first chord, and there's usually like suspension with it. So there's a suspension, like a unresolved sound going to the 1.
It is definitely a very complex and tense chord,
Yeah.
and really difficult to write a singable melody over the notes in that chord.
Yeah.
And because worship music is a style of music that is 100% based on participation, it's really hard to write a melody that makes sense to an average person if you've got such a complex, tense chord somewhere in your music. It's quite hard to write a melody that really makes sense in that context. So that's the major reason why we don't tend to see really complex, extended, tense, jazzy, obtuse chords in worship music, because it makes it very difficult to write a memorable, singable melody. Which,
Yeah.
by the way, is exactly the same for pop music as well. So it's not unique to worship music. Okay?
Chord's very dramatic. It's what I think of it as a very dramatic chord.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's pretty intense. Yeah, like what you were saying.
Yeah. Like, to our Western ears, it sounds seriously like something's wrong. Okay, so let's go through this. So in the key of G, so let's start from the top. So obviously the root chord, the 1 chord is the... Okay, cool. Okay, the 2 chord, we're going to step up the major scale. So what are we at now? Yeah, A minor. Yep, very good. Yep. Okay, the 3 chord. B minor. Yep, because B is the 3rd scale degree in G major. Correct. Okay, the 4 chord. Yep, the 5 chord. D major. Correct. Okay, the 6 chord. In the key of G, the 6 chord.
E minor.
E minor. Yep, E minor. Yep. Yep, very good. Yep, okay. And the 7 chord, or the 7th scale degree in G major is?
F sharp.
It's F sharp diminished. It's F sharp diminished.
Looks cool to write it out.
F sharp dim.
diminished.
That's about as close as I'm going to get to a diminished chord, to be honest. Okay, and then on the column to the right there, you can see the notation, okay? Now, one of the things that's changed a little bit is that I was using Roman numerals when we last looked at this in 2015. Suddenly it seems like Roman numerals are like way daggy and outdated, and people are just using numbers, okay, and they're using the little minus sign to indicate a minor chord. All right, so in Nashville Number System notation, the 1 chord, the 2 minor, the 3 minor, the 4 chord, the 5 chord, the 6 minor, and the 7 are notated as that last column there on the handout. Okay. So here's one of our little summary sentences again. if you're comfortable, just before we do that, so let's just point out that there's 3 major chords in the key, and there's 3 minor chords in the key. I honestly think, for all intents and purposes, we could honestly not even know that there was a diminished chord, that 7th chord, because I can't think of a worship song that uses it. All right, so in that context, we just need to bear in mind there's 3 major chords and 3 minor chords that we can expect to see in any key. Okay. If you're comfortable with the 1, the 4 and the 5, which are our major chords, the 6, the 2, in the keys of G, E, D, A, C and B, then you're comfortable with the chords used in 95% of worship songs. Okay, so you can see there in that table, all of those chords are written there. Okay, what's missing? What's missing from that table? The 3. Okay, can anyone yell out some examples of songs that use the 3 chord? The 3's definitely legit. Like, you can definitely write.
Sounds good.
It sounds good. You can write a good melody with the 3 chord.
So, any suggestions? So this is our guide, the verses.
Do you want to play those first?
Yeah. So, what's it?
We do it in E.
So chord 1. That's the 3, 6, 4. So how about? So it sounds like it kind of gives it a little bit of. You're like, oh, that's. Yeah.
There's a bit of flavour. There's a bit of flavour in the 3 chord, isn't there?
Another one that we do a lot. It's not necessarily in the chorus, but in the bridge of What a Beautiful Name. Equal, now and forever. Here comes you.
Yep. So that's in the key of G.
Yeah. And that's the B. Well.
And that last chord in that chord progression is a B minor. So there's a 6, that's E minor. And that there is chord 3. But it's still fair to say and accurate to say that 3 is still pretty rare.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lovely chord and it's used really nicely, and Brooke Fraser especially seems to have a bit of a penchant for it.
Yeah.
At least we have a French sounding word. Yeah, a penchant for it. But it's totally legit, but it's not in our 95%.
Yeah.
Okay, because of the minor chords, the 6 chord is the one we see all the time. And 2 chords definitely there. And then the 3 chord. But we can say accurately that in 95% of worship songs, the 3 chord is not normally used.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So with this chart here, like, I'd encourage you to sort of have a look over, memorize, like run through it even, because if we can have a grasp of this Nashville number system, or a way of knowing which chords are in which key and being able to quickly go, yep, okay, it's in E today, so therefore these are the chords. Like, it's gonna make such a difference. And we were chatting this afternoon actually about it, and just talking a little bit about, you know, when you say you're trying to learn a new language, for example, and some people just have a real propensity towards being able to do it, and it's like they can pick up foreign languages really easily, and others take a while, like, but you still do it. And I remember learning German through school, which was fun and enjoyable and at times, and like I could remember the words, I could remember, you know, all the numbers, I could remember the different words that identified different things. So come exam time, through my memory, I'd just go all right. But in terms of actually being able to talk German and like converse with someone, that's a different story. And I feel like with our worship music, if we memorize a song, say in the key of G, yep, I know where it goes, that's great. But what happens when a different worship leader's on and they're like, oh, we're actually going to do that song in E today, and you're like, but I know it in G. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's different. So it's kind of like you can memorize songs, or if you can have an understanding of this Nashville number system, you're going to know how to speak the language, as it were,
Yes.
and apply, okay, this song's in E today, that's fine. It's just these chords. And I remember my music theory, to be honest, is not great at all, because I kind of taught myself guitar and through tabs and just trial and error and learning and all that sort of thing. There was like a light bulb moment for me kind of in my teens, maybe 14, 15, where I was playing a lot, hours and hours, you know, in the evenings or whatever, and all of a sudden I was like, no, this song's too high for me to sing. I wonder how I get it to a key that I can sing it in. And it was this light bulb moment of like, okay, so if I'm in E and I'm playing E, B, C sharp minor, A, for example, as a chord progression, that's exactly the same. If I'm playing in G, that's exactly the same kind of progression as G, D, E minor, C. And I was like, before I'd even heard of Nashville Number System or, you know, third, fifths and all that, I was like, why is that? And so I guess I just started to look into it and practice, and like, oh, so in D, A, B minor, G is the same as, and it kind of just grew from there, just figuring out, okay, and I didn't have the Nashville Number System, which would have been very helpful at the time, but just through trial and error, through practice, through working out, I was like, okay, so there are relationships between chords, there are, in certain progressions, the different relationships between the chords in the scale, which probably sounds really simple, but I remember from me as a teenager, that was like a light bulb moment, and helped me a lot in how to play a whole lot of different songs. Does that make sense? Okay.
And that you realised that the chord progression felt a certain way to you, regardless of which key you were playing it in.
Yeah.
And we're gonna talk about that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christelle. You're the best.
So, why we wanted to look at Nashville Number System, one, to know the songs, obviously, but it will help us, particularly musicians amongst us, anticipate what chords are coming, or it is the 4, or it is the 6, or even if we kind of launch into a different, like an example that we were talking about was maybe couple of months ago, we'd done Build My Life, you know, we're just on the bridge chords, I will build my life, and which is the 4, 5, 6, and then the 3, chord 3, which is the same as, what was the other song I just played? What a Beautiful Name. So we flowed into communion. I was like, oh, we'll focus on Jesus, so kind of launched into the bridge of What a Beautiful Name. And then I thought, well, we'll go into the chorus. Hopefully people will just, hopefully the rest of the guys will remember. It goes back to the chord 1, the E. And then I got there and it was, the worship pads were with me. They were the faithful, you know, but it was like, oh, we didn't know where to go, which is totally fine. It was an unplanned song. But in that moment I was like, oh, this is a perfect example of why this is helpful, or why hearing the chord progressions are helpful, because even if you don't have the music in front of you, or you haven't practiced the song, it's like, okay, no, I know either one, it feels like going back to a chord 1, or I haven't played it in E for a while, but I know that it's going back to E and then to B to C. Yeah. So just by way of an example, why I think it's helpful in both a spontaneous but a worship kind of setting as well. So if you know the key, which, say for example in a spontaneous part of the song, if you know the key, which is usually what the previous song has been in, then you know you're a good chance that you're only going to have to kind of take a guess or know maybe 4, 5-ish chords.
Correct.
In a progression, if you're going to flow into something spontaneous.
It's within the scale, isn't it?
Yeah,
Or
it's
bass
it's
chord, bass scale.
yeah.
So it's just find it within the scale, so you get the shape and just within that.
So yeah, it's both finding it, but I believe that you can learn to hear it as well, to hear the feel of, yep, okay, I think the leader's going there, 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 and there, so that's what I'm going to play. So in those times, leaders, you know, if there are spontaneous moments, knowing that, okay, we're in G, There's probably only going to be 4 or 5, if that, chords in this progression. I have a good chance of getting them here or listening out for them.
That's right.
Or leaders can also call out progressions. So, for example, recently I went up to a worship conference up at Hillsong Church, which was really good, but the first night they did like just some kind of leaving some space for the Holy Spirit to move after the message. It's a time of worship, and Brooke Brooke Fraser, you know her as, she was leading, and just to start with, they just decided they'd be in C. And then she was just like, I watched the signal like behind her back, 4, 5, 1. So everyone was like, okay, that's the progression. And they have a music director who speaks into a mic so everyone can hear it. But she just signaled 4, 5, 1. So in the key of C, when you know the Nashville Number System,
Yep.
you look, you know,
Yep.
okay, that's
Okay, it's an F.
it's F, G, C. F, G, C. And that's what they sat on for a while. She sung some stuff out. They went into a medley of different songs, all in C, but with different progressions. Different, you know, they went to Our God Reigns. They went to Break Every Chain. They went to, you know, a few different songs that they medleyed in C, so they
That's
know
right.
it's the same key.
That's right.
But when they went to those songs, yes, they have a music director that can kind of explain where they're going, but everyone would know both the chords because of the Nashville Number System. Even if they usually play that song in A, it's in C, but they know that these are the chords that we're going to play in that. Or by hearing, they know, oh yeah, it actually goes to the 6th there and then back to the... So we're going to show some examples of that shortly.
Right.
But this for me, I think, is a really important part of our worship, being able to kind of flow in those spontaneous moments or in the unplanned song moments. So it's not, I mean, we've all had those moments where the leader's launched into something and everyone's like, ah. And then there's like the trial and error as everyone's trying to figure it out, which is fine. And that's when it, you know, the sound guy's kind of like,
Yeah, the sound guy's going, in an instant, who's my safest bet?
the worship pads.
The laptop.
Yeah, that's but you know, I guess minimising, which is fine when we have to, but minimising that and just learning, okay, yeah, I feel like this is the progression we're going to. And it's usually a simple, if it's a spontaneous thing, it's usually a simple progression. If it's an unplanned song, it's usually in the same key and perhaps roughly the same chord progression.
Mm.
For example, just trying to think of an example. So, God of the Impossible, which we'll look at the chord progression soon, into Let It Rain, which are the same chord progression, just different length of time that you hold the chords on. So, yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but just
Kind of where we're at,
so just to make that really, really super practical, I think that it's a safe assumption to make that the worship leader is not going to suddenly change keys.
Yeah.
Okay, I honestly, if a worship leader was to decide to change keys on the spot, it would be no drama if the team on that Sunday had a bit of a tough time following them and finding out the chords and stuff. That is totally fine.
And if the leader did do that, I would expect that the leader would turn around and say, oh, we're just going to go up to this key.
Exactly.
So at least you kind of...
So with that in mind then, with that in mind then, I think we should all be safe to make the assumption that if we are going to do one of these two things, that it's going to be in the same key as the song you just finished. So if you just did blah in G, then you're in G for whatever's happening next.
Yep.
And this is the thing I think that makes, exactly, the root would be G, correct. And often I find myself, I think, there's this thing in my brain that goes, it could be anything, you know? Like that's how but then I've actually started thinking, well, actually, no, it couldn't be anything. Because we're in G. We were just in G. I'm going to make a safe assumption that we're staying in G. And at that point, we're going to have a look at this right now. We go into a series of ways that you can train yourself to make really educated guesses of what those chords are. And if we can do that as a team, imagine how what we could do together in those two areas, as long as we know the key we're in and we know which chords to expect. And that's why we chose to put Nashville Number System into tonight's workshop. Okay.
I think with worship, it's good because, like you're saying, it's quite rare for a worship leader to just completely do something in their own thoughts, like,
Yep.
oh, I'm doing this, and because it actually, with the spontaneous worship, it's free-flowing, and it just keeps flowing,
Yep.
and so it can't keep flowing if there's suddenly some sort of jerky sort of like
Yep.
boom, we're at another chord that's
Yep.
out there, and
Yeah,
really different.
Yeah.
And I've never, previously, I've never sort of felt like that. In fact, there's never been any silences in worship sets that I've been involved with, because it just kept flowing, and it just kept flowing because people did have that understanding of the chord progressions and where things were going to, so there was never any silences except for spontaneous worship.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
the leaders will call out these are the numbers you're playing, and then you
Well, that is one way. Like if it's simple enough, like 1, 4, 6.
It's hard. It's a bit tricky. It's a bit tricky for guitarists, isn't it? Because they need both hands on the instrument. Even
But that's when if there are a few of us who both know Nashville Number System, or all of us, of course, and by ear where it's going, that's when it's really helpful that if the leader can't kind of, someone can say on the back, hey, I think it's 1, 4, 6, 4, or whatever the progression is, and then, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I would say totally do it. Like if you can see that one of your teammates is struggling a bit, but you feel like, you know what's going on, like that's totally fine to just discreetly go over to that person and just go, I reckon it's G, C, E minor, C.
Yeah.
That's totally cool. And I think it's totally legit for the worship leader to turn around and actually say to someone on stage, it's 1, 4, 6, 4, or whatever. I think that's totally legit too.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Is there anything else on that stuff that you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. So let's keep going, because I'd like to talk about 4 approaches to working out a chord progression by ear. Okay, and it says here most people use a combination of these 4. It would be quite rare the person that only uses one, and they may not even be aware necessarily of exactly how they're going about working out a chord progression by ear, but chances are it's more than one of these 4. Okay, the 4 are to start by looking at the chord quality. And just for tonight, we're just going to look at major and minor chords. Number 2, learning to associate the emotional response you have to a chord learning to associate an emotion with a chord within a progression. Okay, because often these chords have very specific emotional responses. Okay, 3. How far away is the chord from your root, from your home base, from your 1? Okay, so this is based on a knowledge of intervals, and for some people who are strong on intervals, they work out chord progressions by ear, just by the interval from the root note. Okay, and the 4th one is to be able to isolate and sing the bass line. Okay, so all 4 of those can help you, and the thing is that really it's just up to you to try those 4 approaches or any other approach and just see what works for you. But chances are you're probably going to lean a little bit on more than one of those. Okay, so let's just look at major or minor. Okay, the first thing you can do is identify the chord quality. Is it major or minor? Most people do this almost instinctively and rarely confuse one for the other. So let's just have a go, okay? So maybe even if you turn around.
Yeah.
Or no one look at Adzy's chord. Okay, so if he just plays... Okay, so is that chord major or minor?
Major.
That chord's major.
And very out.
That chord's out of tune. So just while he's tuning, this for me is... Because I'm not particularly strong on this stuff, but the major minor thing for me is I rarely would call a major chord minor and a minor chord major. But the point is, of course, that the moment you hear a major chord and you're in G, it can only be the 1, the 4 or the 5, which means you don't have a gazillion options anymore. You've got 3. Okay, so that was a major chord, yep.
So on the bass is different though, hey, because if you're having a G major scale, then it will be 1, 3, 5.
If you're talking about walking up
Walking up
the
here.
notes of the G major scale,
So it's a G. I think it's G.
so we're talking more about the chords
Yeah.
within the key,
Yeah.
and what I'm saying is that if your ear tells you you can hear a major chord,
Yeah.
you really know that you've only got 3 options. It's not a gazillion options, it's 3. And at that, as we'll talk about in a sec, most people can sort of identify the 1 chord, the real resolution, the feeling of something being resolved and home base, which means that if it's not that chord, it can only be the 4 or the 5 if your ear is telling you it's major. So you can see how what we're using is a system to basically narrow in on making an educated guess of these things. Okay, so let's just keep going. Let's just hear another chord. Okay, so is that chord major or minor? That chord's major. Yep. Okay, so that chord feels minor to me. Yep. Really minor. Okay, and what's the and what's making these chords major or minor?
The third.
The third.
What I was going to say to you was that the bass player can actually choose to play either the 1, the 3 or the 5 within each.
Yeah, so it's
That's
like,
what you're talking
yeah,
about.
it's like GBD, so, you know.
Slash chords.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you're not putting the root note, where the bass player is
Yeah.
choosing not to play the root note of the chord. You're right, Dylan.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. And yeah, thanks, Emily. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so for
Yeah. Which are usually the 3 and the 7 bass notes of. So say in G, the slash chord, which is 1 on 3, G over B. I'm sure you've all seen that. So we'll use the B bass note, but not the B minor. Yeah, just to add that tension.
That's right.
And the same as the F sharp.
And we'll talk a little bit about slash chords when we get to point 4, where we talk about singing a bass line. We'll talk about that in just a second. Okay, so major and minor. So all of us there, I think, felt reasonably confident about distinguishing between major and minor. So if there's a chord progression going past you, for me anyway, the first thing I think is that a major chord or a minor chord? If it's major, I've only got 3 options. If it's minor, I've kind of got 2, and maybe in the back of my mind I need to remember that there is actually a 3 chord, a possible third option. Okay, that can help you a lot. It narrows it down. Okay, what about how does each chord feel to you? Learn to identify the emotional response you have to each chord.
Yeah.
Now, listening to Adam talk about the way that he works out chord progressions, I would say that this is his primary way. He's just internalized the way that these chords feel in relation to one another, and he's pretty good at identifying them. So, what do we want to do? Do we want to have a listen to some chords together now, or do we want to start calling out some of the ways that the 1 chord feels, the 6 chord feels? Let's do whatever suits people.
Yeah.
I think just playing each of the chords and everybody having their different emotion attached to it might be helpful first.
Yep.
Because, I mean, talking about the feel of something, like it can sound a little bit airy-fairy, wishy-washy, like, oh, it just feels like this. But I think, as we'll soon see, like there is a certain feel or emotional response that a chord in a progression will generate, and as you intentionally seek to I guess, work on this and listen and like reference the chord charts with what you're hearing, you begin to see, I believe, that there is a certain feel for when like particular progressions in a key. So like going from the 4 to the 6, it just you just know, like it just feels that way. And so I guess I just want to encourage all of us, like you might be like, oh, I don't think I could ever like just play by ear or hear everything. Well, I believe that all of us can. Like anything, it takes a bit of practice and intentionality. You know, if you think about a good wine, and I don't really like or drink wine, but you look at the back of it and it says, you know, musk undertones and fruity overlay, and you think,
oak, blueberries and pepper.
Yeah. And you have a sip and you're like, I'm not getting any of that. But for the trained palate, you'd be able to distinguish those things in the wine.
And what's the key? Drinking a lot of wine.
We might edit that out.
No, I actually said that because of course the analogy holds true. What's the key here? Playing a lot of chord progressions.
Yeah. And as you play a lot of chord progressions, as you listen to a lot of, I think that's one of the keys, just listening. And if it helps to have the chords in front of you, oh, that's going from 4 to 6 there, whatever, then you'll begin to distinguish, yeah, I think in that part of the chorus, it's that chord. It feels like it's going to that chord. It feels like it's then going. So that's kind of what we mean by the feel and what certain progressions sound like together, which we'll get to in a little bit as well, because you'll be able to identify. We've chosen some common chord progressions that are used in worship songs that I'm sure as soon as you hear, and I'll kind of do a bit of a medley of songs, you'll be like, oh, okay, they're all the same. So
maybe to make that practical, are you happy to play in G?
Yeah.
Are you happy to play a G and an E minor? Okay, so we're gonna go between the 1 chord and the 6 chord. Okay, so we're just gonna go between a 1 chord. Let's go back to a 1.
I need to change my strings, so.
Okay, so what kind of words would people use to describe the feeling of those 2 chords?
The 1 chord, I think, feels relaxed.
It definitely feels relaxed.
The 1 chord that feels relaxed.
Yep, it's a good word. Okay, something else?
I said happy and feeling at home.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, yeah, the home kind of reference point of the key. That's how I'm like, yep, that feels like.
Exactly, and especially as you introduce more chords into a progression and get further from home, when you go back home, it feels really homey. Yeah, the one...
Go home. That's it. Yep.
Yeah, it's that real home-based feeling. That feeling of, I could end the song on that chord.
Yep.
And it would feel resolved.
Yep.
I have the words content and full.
Perfect.
Good words. They're good words for chord 1.
Mm-hmm.
Content and full. Yep. Okay, anything else? Okay, and what about when we go to the 6th chord? What words?
Reflective.
Yeah. Especially when it's been played as a minor 7. So Adzy's actually playing that chord as a minor 7. Can you just play it as a straight up E minor? Yeah, you're right. Just because the minor 7 gives it that reflective. So there's our G. And that's a classic E minor. That. Yeah, putting the thing in. So that's it's so
common. It is quite common.
Very common.
Yeah.
And also, it's so minor. it's almost impossible to miss that that's so minor. Okay,
I
so what?
I hear the tension in that. Like it feels like there's tension there. It's kind of building to something or anticipating.
Anticipation, yep. Okay, any other words to describe a 6 chord for you guys?
For some reason, I thought it sounded a bit country.
Yeehaw. It does now.
Maybe that's just where I got CDs.
When Adam first played the other one, that other one sounded different to the one that you played. So the first one sounded lost to me, and then this one sounds just sad.
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 Yeah. Yeah, straight up minor chords do sound mournful, sad. But But I think it can also sound sincere. There's something sincere about a 6 chord as well.
A little bit of suspense, what Adam said too.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have the word deep.
Yep. I often get some kind of gut reaction when I hear the 6 chord in a chord progression. There's something about the kind of the minorness of it and the sincerity of it that I almost always have the same gut reaction to a 6 chord in a chord progression, no matter where it is in the order of the chords. Okay, can we have a go at doing a 1 and a 4?
Yeah. Okay, so this is 1.
Okay, any words there or any kinds of feelings around that 4 chord?
It's not about lifting.
Mm-hmm.
Reading something.
Yeah, I got travelling.
Travelling.
Yeah, it always has that road trip kind of...
What are you driving?
Yeah.
I immediately got rising hope.
Yep, absolutely. There is something for me that's quite easy about the
Yeah,
4
easy.
chord and the way that you can endlessly cycle on a 1 and a 4.
Yeah.
And it's got enough movement to feel like you're going somewhere. But the 4 chord still has a semi-resolved feeling to it.
Which is like a lot of songs actually resolve on the 4 chord. So, you know, every knee will bow before the lion. You know, you could, every knee will bow before him. Like you could resolve it there on the 4. Bow before him. Or the 1. Like
That's right.
4 you can, there are a lot of songs that resolve on 4.
That's right. So for the purposes of tonight, with the 4 chord, I think that the fact that you can cycle between a 1 and a 4 and that can feel totally good for 5 minutes with 2 chords. There's enough movement to feel like you're going somewhere,
Yeah.
but there's enough of an easy feeling of endlessly cycling. So if you're really not sure where to go, a 1 and a 4 is, and you think the 2nd chord is major, a 4 is a pretty good choice. And actually, the reason that 4 chord feels semi-resolved is because the G note, so we're in G at the moment, so as he's playing a G and a C, the 1 and the 4. Okay, the G note is in the C chord. It's the 5, so the 1, 3 and 5 that makes up the C chord. The G note is in the C chord, and that's what gives it a semi-resolved feel. So we're going to do a 5 chord like right now. The G note is not in the 5 chord, and that's what makes the 5 chord feel more tense than the 4. So let's have a go at, let's do G's, let's just say G and a D. So let's have a go at that. This is 1 and 5. Okay, any kinds of words there? what do we feel when we hear a 5 chord?
It's like waiting for the next chord. Or
Yes. Yeah, it exactly.
So where are you going?
It's a very leading chord.
Yes.
That's the classic purpose of a 5 chord is the lift
Yeah.
or the
lift.
lead.
Yeah, and that to me is something whenever you go to the 5 chord, wherever you are, feels like it's lifting, it's about to go somewhere. So we're going to probably show, if we have time,
If we have time, yeah.
an example of a really good song. The verses are just 1 and 4, 1 and 4. Then the chorus adds in chord 6 into the mix there as well, 1, 4, 6, 4. And then the bridge, it kind of goes to
The first time
5.
the 5 chord is
Yeah.
played,
And it just
it
feels like it lifts it, it elevates it, progresses it somewhere, and you can really hear that, I feel, in the actual progression. So
absolutely right.
yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
so
we've
just
got 2 chord.
let's just briefly look at the 2 chord. Okay, any words there? I always find the 2 quite hard to put words to.
Melancholic.
There's, for me it feels like there's the tension there still, but that it's progressing somewhere. Because usually when you have the the chord 2, you're usually going
Yeah.
to either, and a lot of times either the 6, which adds kind of another layer of tension, or
Yep.
the G over B, the 1 over 3,
Yep, and
because
you're
it's the
gonna step-
ascending.
You're going to step your way up.
Like it just feels like a step.
Yep.
Like a step where you're heading somewhere.
Yes.
Undecided, sort of undecided.
Yep. Yep. Okay, so really just the point there is just to have a go at identifying what kind of emotional response you have to each of those chords in a progression. It's going to be different for every person, but that clear distinction between major and minor feeling really quite different, and being able to narrow that down and then learning to identify your own emotions. Those 2 things together can really help.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just briefly take a look at the next one, which is to identify intervals. Now, some people are going to gravitate toward this really instantly, and for other people it's not going to be such a helpful one. But basically, if you can learn to identify the intervals from the root note of the key, then it can certainly give you a pretty good indication of what kind of chord progression you've got. Okay, so I've given you some examples there of different intervals. So happy birthday, so the major... Da, 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 that interval is a major second. Okay, so if you were to be singing the bass note of a chord and it was da da da, it tells you you're going from the 1 chord to the 2 chord. That interval, happy birthday, da 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 da, that is a major second. Okay, a major third. Oh when of Oh When the Saints. Okay, so again, if you are hearing that interval between the root and your chord of interest, you've got a 3 chord. Okay, if we go to a perfect 4th, okay, so we've got Astray or Ame of Amazing Grace. Or Here Comes the Bride. Okay, so again, if you hear that interval, you know you've got a 4 chord. When we go on to 5s, Twinkle, twinkle, that jump, that's a 5th. Or the first 2 notes of Star Wars is also a perfect 5th. Can you just give me the G again?
I don't know.
Okay, that's a 5th. Okay, major 6th.
Sorry to all the
Major 6th. I couldn't really find an epically good example of a major 6th, but that's Ha. Yeah, that's Ha. baby, don't say a word. So that's Hush Little of Hush Little Baby. We're getting pretty high now. But that interval there is a major sixth. Okay, and then I've completely left off the seventh because you don't need it. And then octave, obviously, somewhere over the rainbow. Okay. So for some people who have an existing knowledge of intervals, being able to hear those intervals between a root and a chord leads them almost immediately to what chord they're hearing. Okay. And then the last one is to sing the bass line of a chord progression. Since almost all chords have the root note in the bass, singing the bass line reveals the chord progression almost all the time. Slash chords, or chord inversions, which is what Dylan was talking about before, where you choose to put either the third of the chord or the fifth of the chord at the base of the chord. So chord inversions are the exception. So again, in the key of G, the common ones we would see are G over B, D over F sharp, or possibly C over G.
C over G, yep.
Yep, C over
Or
G.
G over
So
D.
4 over 1. So in Nashville Number System, just so we know, these are a 1 over 3 for a G over B, a 5 over 7 for a D over F sharp, or a 4 over 1 for a C over G. Okay? So again, some people are great at zoning in on the bass line of a chord progression, and they train their ears for the bass line to inform them of what chords are being played. Okay. Somewhere in amongst those four, you're going to find something that helps you. And it's really just a matter of trial and error to see what kind of clicks for you.
Or another way, falls into those, is listening. You know, we've given some great examples of songs here that we'll get to, but like choosing a bunch of songs that have the same kind of chord progression, and just like learning, even if they're in different keys, learning what they sound like with the different progressions. Yep.
Okay. So one of the best resources that we've come across in terms of training your ear is Jeffrey Kundi's book. So does anyone know who Jeffrey Kundi is?
He's the Jesus Culture guitarist, the guy who plays lead guitar on Jesus Culture. Yep.
He also happens to be a pretty accomplished pianist as well. And he's done a number of books, and he did an e-book on training your ear. And on the e-book, he's got audio examples of chord progressions. Okay, so let's have a go at doing it together, and let's see if we can work out what these chord progressions are. The way that he does it, which I think is very helpful, is he plays the root chord first. So you can establish what key we're in. He's going to play the 1 chord first. Then he's going to play just single notes, the bass notes of the chords of interest. And then he's going to play the chords of interest. Root position, 1st, 3rd and 5th of the chords. Okay, so let's just have a listen to it. Okay, here we go. Okay, so that's our 1 chord. Okay, here's the bass. Okay, that's going to be our progression, and here are the chords. So, bass notes again. And now chords. Okay.
So I guess.
Do we want to work our way through it? How many chords can we hear? Yeah, there's 3 chords. Okay? Do any of them sound minor? I agree.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, they're all major.
1, 4, 5, 4. 1, 4, 5, 4.
Yep. Okay, let's see if I can just jump ahead. No, I can't. Yep. So So what we've got here is a 1-4-5-4 progression. Yep, that's right. And yes, we are in the key of C. So in this case, we have a C, an F, a G, and an F. So to me, it's really helpful to hear that they're all major. And I can hear that step between the 1 and the 4. Then I can hear it step up a tone to the 5. It still feels major. And then come back down to the 4. Okay, let's just listen to it once more. Okay, so these are bass notes again. That's 1. Okay, I'm just going to stop it there. Da, 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 da. That really feels like a 4th. So if you're an intervalsy person, that happy birthday, no, that's happy birthday. There's a 2. Sorry. So here comes the bride. Yep. So or Amazing Grace or Australians All Let Us Rejoice. They're our 4ths. So that really feels like a 4th, and then you can feel it step up again, and it still feels major, and so we know it's got to be a 5. Okay. Really major. And it's got that really classic 12-bar bluesy kind of feel to it with a 1, a 4, and a 5, and a 4. And of course, so many songs are written based on that. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay.
The resource is in the notes, I think, at the end. If you can just get it on iBooks, or there's a website you can go to as well. So, but it's an ebook, so all those audio examples are in there.
Let's do another one. You guys happy to do another one?
Yeah.
I'm just conscious of the time. But let's just do one more. Okay, so that's our 1. And we're going to do bass notes again. Here we go. 1. Here are our bass notes. Okay, and let's hear the chords. Okay, so let's just talk about major and minor. So, sorry, how many chords have we got in that progression?
4.
We've got 4 chords, okay? How many of them are major and how many of them are minor?
2 of each.
Not quite 2 of each.
3 majors, 1 minor.
3 majors, 1 minor. Okay, so where's the minor?
The last one?
Let's go again. Let's go again. This is good. It's good to wrestle with it. That's our 1. Let's listen to the bass. Okay, they're the bass notes of our chords. Again. Now chords. Major. Major. Okay. So we said that there's 3 majors and 1 minor.
Yeah.
So which one's the minor chord?
The 3rd.
The 3rd chord.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And do we want to have a guess? So the first chord is chord 1.
Yeah.
Yep. Do we want to have a guess what chord that 3rd chord is?
5.
Because hang on, didn't we just agree that the third chord in that progression is a minor chord?
Yeah.
So it can only be
4 or 5.
2 or 6.
okay. So what are our 3 options for minor chords?
For minor chords.
6 or 2.
Oh, for the third one.
Yeah, sorry. So for the 3rd chord,
Okay.
we agreed. Yep, was a minor chord. Yep, and so we know it's most likely to be a 6, or a 2, or maybe a 3. So what do we reckon that 3rd chord is in that sequence? What do we reckon? It feels pretty epic to me. It feels pretty minory, like pretty strongly minory. So I personally would hear that personally as a 6, I think. Okay, which means we've got 2 more chords to go. The first chord's a 1, the 3rd chord in that sequence is a 6, and we've got 2 other major chords either side. Do we want to hear it again? Let's hear it. Let's hear it once more. The other thing is, does it sound like a song to you? Could you identify a song based on that progression? Okay, and here are the chords. I'm totally hearing "Let It Be" by the Beatles. But it could, of course, be hundreds of songs. Do we want to have a go? What do we reckon that might be?
So 1, 4, 6, 5.
1, 5, 6, 4.
There you go.
5, 6, 4.
Okay. And what led us to get to 1, 5, 6, 4?
The second major was higher than the fourth, and then we've only obviously got 4 majors.
Because I could hear the interval from 1 to 5.
So you're quite strong on the intervals part of it. That jump. The Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, or the Star Wars interval there. That jump from the root to the fifth. Yeah. That second major chord feels further from home to me than the last major chord, the fourth chord in that sequence. So to me, that would lead me to go, I reckon it's a 1, 5, 6, 4. And it is a 1, 5, 6, 4. Which leads us into the last bit for tonight, because we are seriously running out of time on these pieces of equipment. Do you want to talk about common chord progressions?
Yeah.
If we look at the bottom of the page.
Just quickly, because as you probably will have discovered by now from having been on Teams and stuff, there are some common chord progressions that, when translated to any key, will have the same sort of feel and relationship between chords. So we've sort of come up with the most common 4, and there's slight variations of these, but certainly across the board I would say these are probably some of the most common. The 1, 5, 6, 4 that we just heard, that was the progression we just heard. So let's just so blessed be your name. So receive our adoration. That's 1, 5, 5. Jesus, Lamb. 6, and then the 4,
which could also be
forever He won His glorified. 4, 6, He is here. 4, and then goes in. Beautiful name it is. What a beautiful name it is.
5.
The name of Jesus. Now the interesting here is it does go down to the 5, but that's all right.
Yeah.
Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Here I am to worship. Here I am to bow. Here I am to say that you're my God. And so on. And so all those songs are not necessarily in G. Like I would usually do them in different keys. Our leaders would do them in different keys. But you can see, you can medley them because they all have the same progression.
Correct.
1, 5, 6, 4. They all have the same, this is in E. You'll notice that. And so on and so on. So I guess I'd encourage you to sort of, you can use those songs, or you can find other songs that you may already know or that are more favoured of yours to look through and learn and listen. Oh yeah, that's that key, and then in a different key there's this song. Another really popular or common chord progression is 6, 4, 1, 5. And so that, of course, is starting with the minor, the 6, and then so hallelujah to the 4, hallelujah, the 1, to the 5. Let it rain, let it rain. Open the floodgates of heaven. To our God we lift up one voice. 4, up a song. 1, faster, but again the same. God of the impossible. Gotta be impossible. You're a good, good God. And then break every chain, break every chain, break every chain. Does that? Can you kind of see like that
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
of feel? The
You guys are totally
commonality?
catching all that, aren't you?
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, no? The commonality of those chords and where you can sort of go as well melodically. Look, there's plenty of others there that you probably recognise. You know, the one 4 1 5 6. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Bless the Lord, my soul.
1, 5, 6. 5, 6, 4,
Shine your light and
1,
let the whole world
5,
see. We're singing
6.
for the glory. And so on and so on. There's plenty more songs that use that progression, say for verses. And
That's if you don't do like B flat to E flat. Will you be playing those?
but even in those keys,
That's
if
right.
they were in E flat or
Yes,
B
yes.
flat, it would be.
The movement between the chords
Yeah.
would still feel the same way.
You'd notice the feel if you're just listening. You can learn to recognise that it's that's that progression, but in perhaps a slightly different key. So, and then again, there's some more there that just for the sake of time we won't
Yep.
go into. Is there any questions on that? Like there's a ton of other songs with those progressions or similar progressions that you could look up. You could sort of follow along with the chords and just learn to listen for, okay, yep, that's where it's going. That's the relationship between those two chords. That's how it sounds when you go from that chord to that chord and
Yeah.
then on to that chord.
Yep.
So,
I guess in a song, so when you lead, you wouldn't expect everyone to come almost steady, you know. Someone will be working it out, so
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
the guitar is
So,
coming first and
in a
drums,
spontaneous
and then-
moment, it might
and-
just
and
be
then
like,
towards the beginning, then everyone pop, just because of
in a spontaneous moment, a little tip is usually, if there is a spontaneous moment, more often than not it will start just with 1 and 4.
yeah.
So it might just be like literally the
Because we talked about the way that can cycle endlessly,
you
happily.
can just cycle, and then you might like to put in like the chord 6, which you can sort of listen out for. So we've done that a few times.
So we're gonna go to
love you, Jesus. Like, can
You can
hear
feel the sincerity in
Yeah.
that 6 chord.
and back to the 4. That's So yes, you don't have to jump in straight
Yeah,
away,
yeah.
but as you listen,
You can pick up.
you know, hopefully as we all learn to kind of do this a little bit more and intentionally practice it, we'll be able to pick up a little bit quicker, like, oh yeah, that's either that's that song, I know that song, I've played it before in E and he's doing it in G, but that's okay because I know that the chord progression is 6, 4, 1, 5. So I'll be fine because I know what those chords are in G.
Yep.
Or if it's that, it's having a listen, yeah, okay, I think that it feels like it's going to that chord, the number 4 chord. Oh yeah, I think he just went to the 6 or she went to the 6 there. Being able to kind of just slowly follow along by hearing, by feeling. Yep.
But yes, Dylan, I think like that's a totally feasible, practical way that it'll take a few goes through a chord progression, possibly many goes through, and there are going to be some Sundays where it's actually over before you've actually worked out what the chord progression was, which is okay. But what we're looking for is a trajectory where we can pick up on the chord progressions in a shorter and shorter and shorter space of time, essentially just based on narrowing down what options it could be, which I think is really the take-home message from this.
Yeah, and you know, perhaps it's listening. If you're in the congregation, one of the leaders does something like obviously worshiping, but trying to hear it or chatting to them afterwards, like say, hey, when you did that spontaneous bit, you know,
What was that?
was it 1 and 4? That's what I think I was hearing. and the leader might be like, I can't remember. But, or you listen back. Or another great way, I just thought it was, there's some spontaneous songs on various worship CDs. Bethel has some. Our songs, our CDs have a couple of spontaneous moments where that would be a good way to just start to practice. Okay, where did they go there in the chord progressions? Where did they go? And you can just put it on repeat. Okay, I think they're going, and just see how you go with that. Practice, listening, intentionality, figuring out what works for you, asking questions. Yep.
Okay.
Cool.
Great.
Well, thank you very much. Very good.
Pleasure.
Thank you for coming.
If you enjoy this stuff, the only other thing I would just say there is there's one other website that I found that was fantastic. It's Toned Ear. I thought it was Toned Ear until I worked out it was Toned
You thought the
Ear.
R was an F.
And it's really, really good at this stuff because it gives you a series of quizzes where you can you can start very simple with 2 chords and just a 1, a 4 or a 5. And then as you become comfortable with that, you can add a 6, or you can go to a 3-chord progression, or you can go to a 4-chord progression, or you can go to inverted chords, or you can go to extended 4-note chords where you put in the 7ths. So it's really good and it's free.
Yep.
Toned Ear, not toned ear.
Toned Ear.
So if you enjoy this stuff, that's a really good way to go. Okay. Would you like me to pray?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Great.
Father, we just thank you for tonight. And Lord, we thank you for this year together as a worship team. We thank you for all of your goodness and your faithfulness to us, Lord. And Lord, just as we prayed last week, we pray that the motivation of our hearts as we go about improving the skill of our hands would be pleasing and honouring to you, Lord.
Yes.
We pray for all the people that haven't been able to make it tonight for good reasons. And we pray your blessing on them, Lord.
Yes.
We thank you for tonight, and we thank you for this year. And we look forward to what you have in store next year, Lord. In your name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.